Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The United States is the largest nation in terms of GDP on earth. It is the most powerful military that this earth has ever seen. We have a great country, and our president is considered the leading figure in this earth. North Korea, on the other hand, is a tiny little country that has probably a gross domestic product that would be less than Rhode Island. They're starving their people. They don't have much of anything. And they have a young guy in charge of themselves, Kim Jong-un, who's part of that crime family that's run that country for several decades. So the President of the United States has honored that little guy with saying, I will come all the way from the United States to Singapore, and I will sit down and talk to you. Now, that's a great honor for that little country to have the United States, greatest nation on earth, to deal with him. But instead of that, they're starting to throw down the gauntlet and say, oh, no, 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 we're not going to have this summit unless you do this and that. We'll call it off over the one-sided demand that it give up its nuclear program. Well, so much for that. We're not going to allow them to have a nuclear program beyond what they've already had. And they do have a number of nuclear weapons. They have been exporting their nuclear technology. They are the author of cyber warfare of a massive scale against the United States. And the president is doing them a huge favor to go over there. But this Kim says, oh, no, 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 I'm going to back off unless you do this, this, and this. Now, is the president going to hang tough? I think he ought to. I think that he needs to show Kim, look, buddy, we're the big guys, and I'm doing you a favor. If you don't want this summit, we'll call it off, and then we'll stick it to you big time in cyber and sanctions. And if you get too out of hand, we'll bring our military against you. And what he said is, I've got a bigger button to touch on my nuclear weapon than you do. It's time we show those people we're not going to be bullied by that little regime. Wendy.
Yeah. What's more, Pat, the Kim regime is also blaming what it calls provocative military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. As Heather Sells reports, some believe the North is just playing hardball.
North Korea issued the surprise announcement via state media early Wednesday. It threatened to call off the historic summit with the U.S. and blamed military drills between the U.S. and South Korea, which started Monday.
We have not heard anything from that government or the government of South Korea to indicate that we would not continue conducting these exercises.
The two-week drills between Washington and Seoul are an annual event. And South Korea says that Kim Jong-un told visiting officials in March that he understands the drills would take place again this year. On Tuesday, South Korea's military reported that North Korea was moving forward with plans to close its nuclear test site next week. And just last week, North Korea released 3 American prisoners. President Trump praised Kim Jong-un as he welcomed them home.
I really think he wants to do something and bring that country into the real world.
So why the sudden flip after so much progress? North Korea says the U.S. is making a, quote, one-sided demand to get it to give up its nukes. But observers warn North Korea may simply be trying to bolster its position and win concessions right before the big meeting. China is now urging North Korea to continue with plans for the U.S. summit. It is set for June 12th in Singapore. Heather Sells, CBN News.
You know, the thing that's been alarming me about Turkey used to be a strong ally of the West. It's part of NATO, and it's a very important country. When I was in Korea in the Marines, the Turks were noted fighters, and they were fighting alongside the United Nations forces against, what amounted to North Korea and China. But now, Turkey, which was a strongly secular country, has turned to Islamic radicalism. And they say we're going to punish Israel for defending its borders. John Jessup has more on that story.
Thanks, Pat. Fallout over the violence on Israel's border with Gaza is sweeping across the Middle East, with Turkey expelling Israel's ambassador. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the move is yet another sign this former ally is embracing radical Islam.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan labeled Israel's acts along the Gaza border as genocide. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shot back, stating, Erdogan is among Hamas's biggest supporters, and there is no doubt that he well understands terrorism and slaughter. I suggest that he not preach morality to us. Other nations also criticized Israel, specifically blaming the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem for the unrest. America's UN Ambassador Nikki Haley put the blame solely on Hamas and Iran.
In recent days, Hamas terrorists, backed by Iran, have incited attacks against Israeli security forces and infrastructure. Those who suggest that the Gaza violence has anything to do with the location of the American embassy are sorely mistaken. Rather, the violence comes from those who reject the existence of the State of Israel in any location.
This IDF video shows thousands of Gazans trying to breach Israel's border, while this footage documented a Hamas squad armed with grenades and weapons trying to cut through the fence. The IDF identified 24 of the dead as known terrorists. Hamas also attacked the Kerem Shalom crossing. CBN News has reported it's the crossing where Israel daily sends tons of food, fuel, and materials inside Gaza for its people. Despite the evidence, Turkish President Erdogan still condemned Israel and backed its longtime Muslim Brotherhood ally, Hamas.
Turkey is moving away from its former role as a reliable Western ally and as a NATO member in good standing, and more towards a sense that Turkey is a state deeply tinged with Islamist ideology and acting according to a sectarian and quite dangerous agenda in the neighborhood. Spire
says Erdogan has embarked on an historic mission to transform Turkey from a secular republic to an Islamic state. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, back to you.
You know, if you read the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 38, there's a discussion of coalition that moves in the latter days against Israel. And one of the nations that's described there is Gomer, G-O-M-E-R. And some analysts are saying, well, that was Germany. No, it's not. Gomer is Turkey. And Gog and Magog are located in Turkey. And so you see all these prophetic names, they're right centered in Turkey. As a matter of fact, when you look at Revelation and the Asian churches that were written to by John, and, you know, by the angel who was giving him that message, those churches were all in Turkey. Turkey was very, very important. And that nation has been secular, and, you know, was a revolution. And they established a secular democracy, and they've been a good friend of the West. Now Erdogan says, I am a Muslim, and I'm going to pull this country into radical Islam. That is biblically spoken of, but for all of us, it's something that we should be alarmed about. John?
Pat, the Senate candidate backed by President Trump won the Pennsylvania GOP primary. Republican Congressman Lou Barletta will face Bob Casey, the incumbent Democrat, in November. Republicans see Barletta's victory as a sign of Trump's popularity across the state. However, about 100,000 more Democrats than Republicans turned out to vote in their primary contest Tuesday. Democrats are aiming to win several seats in the Keystone State as part of a national push to take back the House. Earlier this week, Mark Lauder, a former assistant to President Trump, told CBN News he believes the president's successes will help with the GOP turnout this fall.
I'm not as concerned as I used to be, and I think I'm getting a little more confident every day because I think the American people are seeing through the noise and the nonsense coming out of Washington, D.C., and they're seeing those results, and they want them to continue.
Well, we all know evangelical voters played a key role in President Trump's 2016 election. Now, as all eyes turn to the midterms, the big question is, will that same force head back to the polls without Mr. Trump's name on the ballot? Chief political correspondent David Brody gives us a closer look.
We've heard the media narrative.
The wave that Republicans fear is going to wipe them out in this year's congressional elections.
It is predictions of a blue wave that could give Democrats control of the House and possibly the Senate as well. And it has conservatives like Ralph Reed on high alert as to what that could mean for the faith agenda and the Trump administration.
They're going to move to impeach the president. There's no question about it. They can't and won't deny it. And if you think it's a good idea for the United States of America to be tied up in an impeachment proceeding for the 2 years leading up to the re-election of the president, then by all means, make Nancy Pelosi Speaker and Chuck Schumer Majority Leader, because that's what's going to happen.
Evangelical leaders say the only way it won't happen is for the flock to show up in force come November.
For President Trump's agenda to be furthered, they've got to have the evangelical vote. They have to.
Chad Connolly knows what he's talking about. As faith director for the Republican National Committee in 2016, Connolly spent countless hours meeting with pastors across the country. That investment paid off with record turnout. New leadership at the RNC, however, wanted change, so Connolly and his contact list left the building.
The party's very metric driven, and it's really hard to measure relationships. But if you have a relationship, you get a multiplier effect of the results, because then you got pastors doing the work as opposed to just a party hack.
Dave Carney, a seasoned operative for both Republicans and the faith community, isn't so sure that the party understands what's needed in the care and feeding department.
And the party has a mixed track record at best in terms of figuring out how to deal with evangelical. They depend on evangelical vote to win. Every Republican in the country does. Yet they treat them almost like the Democrats treat African Americans. They take them for granted.
Hi, we're Ohio Christian University students.
That's where outreach from conservative faith groups can make a difference. Typically, in a midterm election, evangelicals make up about 26% of the overall vote. Although that's a good number, enthusiasm will need to be even higher this year to overcome what's building on the left.
They have energy because they're motivated by their blind hatred of the president. And we need to have a similar motivation, not necessarily hating somebody, but motivating them to get excited to be involved.
I think the question is the other side so fired up, a la sort of the Tea Party of 09 and 10, that you're going to see the most incredible turnout on the left that you've ever seen.
While it's too early to predict any turnout or results, there are some recent encouraging signs. President Trump's approval number is at its highest point this year. In some early primaries, Republican voter turnout has been high, and GOP fundraising is doing well, including $30 million from one mega donor. Whatever happens, David Lane with the American Renewal Project says the stakes are high and very obvious.
We are real clear about what we're doing. There's no, hidden agenda about it. We're trying to restore America to our Judeo-Christian heritage and reestablish a biblically based culture in America.
Evangelicals see Trump implementing that agenda so far, but after 2018, it's anybody's guess. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, David. Well, the World Health Organization wants a global ban of trans fats. The United States has already outlawed trans fats, also known as hydrogenated oils, which helps prolong the shelf life of some foods. The ingredient is chemically similar to plastic and is linked to a number of health issues.
Trans fats are really like plastic, and when we eat them, they incorporate in our cells, and the cells cannot communicate or talk to one another. In turn, hormones are disturbed. Weight gain follows, but more troubling, the risk for heart disease, cancer, stroke, infertility goes up.
The World Health Organization is urging countries to ban trans fats within the next 5 years. Back in 2015, the American food industry was given 3 years to get rid of trans fats, and that ban takes effect next month. Pat, this is something that you've been warning about for quite some time.
We've been sounding that alarm for years, and I think it's important, but the trans fats they're food preservative, and you can find them in crackers, and you can find them in cookies, and you can find them in cereal, and you can find them right across the board. And now there's a ban on them, and it's about time. But these trans fats are bad. And you see the label hydrogenated so and so. That's the key, hydrogenated fats.
So no Crisco.
No Crisco.
No Crisco in your biscuits.
Well, we used to cook fried chicken with Crisco. It was magnificent.
Well, my dad swears that the secret to his French toast is margarine, not butter. And I'm always saying, no. Yeah. But he said that's the secret ingredient. So
well, okay, well, whatever the secret is, but nevertheless, folks, it's
Dad,
dangerous.
Listen to Pat.
It's bad for you.
You won't
Wendy.
listen to me. Listen to Pat. Butter in the French toast. Okay.